5 neglected muscles that you should not ignore. What's up guys, Sean here from Breakthrough Bootcamp, and today's video is going to be all about the forgotten ones. So whether you don't train at all, you're a beginner or you're advanced, these are the muscles that tend to be left behind and they serve an important purpose. Some of them are different, but either way, they're neglected and they shouldn't be, and I'm going to explain why. Number 5 is a muscle called the Serratus Anterior. Serratus Anterior. It's a muscle that is attached between the ribs and the shoulder blade, so right here. And this muscle looks like an extension of the ribs or like fingers. And what this muscle does, this muscle is going to prevent your shoulder blade from tipping forward. It's going to help your shoulder with your overall health and your posture as well. And perhaps most importantly for people who are interested in watching these type of videos, it is the sign of a truly impressive physique. If you can see those serratus anterior muscles, it tends to be a sign of an impressive physique. So the reason it's neglected is because it's really difficult to train unconsciously. It's really difficult to work as a secondary aspect of an exercise, meaning you have to be really intentional with it. And the best way to do this is through protraction, so the shoulder blade coming forward like that, and upward rotation, so up and forward as well. And in order to really get the serratus anterior to work, you almost have to exaggerate that range of motion. So I love exercises like the landmine press, where you press and just kind of get that extra push forward. You can do this with scapular push-ups. You can do this with even a regular chest press, but you have to really exaggerate that range of motion. So once you're locked out, push those shoulders forward and even make that range of motion greater to really emphasize that serratus anterior. So that's number 5 on the list. Number 4, it's not one muscle, but it is a group of 3 muscles, and we're talking about the hamstrings. So the hamstrings are on the list for a few reasons. First, not enough people train legs in general. The legs are the biggest muscles, they're the strongest muscles. It should account for at least half of your training because of how big they are. And for those who do train legs, most people tend to be very quad dominant. So the majority of their strength comes from the front part of their thighs rather than the back. Normally it's not a big deal, but usually this difference is very pronounced to the point where it can become detrimental. Because what ends up happening is even when you are trying to work the legs, squats, deadlifts, lunges, they work the hamstrings, but typically they are done indirectly. So the other big developed muscles that tend to be the imbalance towards that side will get the additional work. So really important that you do isolation hamstring work, especially if you struggle with the hip hinge and you're not able to convert a regular deadlift into a Romanian deadlift, you're going to have issues with your hamstrings. So you want to make sure you're able to do some isolation work, stability ball hamstring curl. If you have a machine, you can do the laying machine leg curl. You can do bridge walkouts. You can do any exercise that really maximizes the flexion in the knee and gets that pump going in the back of the leg. So make sure you do not neglect the hamstrings. Don't just assume that these compound lifts are going to work your hamstrings. Number 3 is the rear delt. So this is, you could argue if it's its own muscle or part of an original muscle. It's part of the deltoid, but it's the back part of the shoulder. And the reason this is neglected and undertrained is because we tend to do a lot of shoulder work and upper body work, but it's almost always the front part of the shoulder, maybe a little bit in the side, but very rarely do people actively train the back, the rear delt. And it's important for a few reasons. Number 1, and probably most importantly, is the underdevelopment of these rear delts and the overdevelopment of the front part of the delts often leads to rounded shoulders. So your shoulders come forward and then your posture is like this all the time. Not a good look, also not good for your shoulders. So by developing this, maybe by stretching out the chest a little bit, you pull those shoulders back, which makes not only your shoulder a lot healthier and safer, but it shows a much more confident, impressive physique and posture as well. So exercises like the rear delt fly, the reverse fly, the band pull apart, the high row, anything that really gets those elbows flared out. Because if you keep your elbows in, you're gonna end up using your lats, which tend to be really strong already. So bring those arms out, squeeze your shoulder blades, work those smaller muscles in the upper back and back part of the shoulder. Really gonna help out with your posture and your shoulder health. Number 3, and again, this is not one muscle, but a group of muscles, and this is the forearms, or just grip strength in general. Grip strength, I cannot tell you how many studies show the correlation between grip strength, vitality, strength, mortality rates. Basically, if you have a strong grip, you're more likely to live longer and be healthier. Sounds crazy, but it's true. So what happens when you don't have weak or when you don't have strong grip is it can be the limiting factor for a lot of exercises. If you want to get better at the deadlift, strengthen your grip. If you want to get better at the pull-up, strengthen your grip. If you want to get better at lifting heavy weights, strengthen your grip. And most people shy away from this, think that they're going too heavy because not the exercise itself is a problem, but that their grip is too weak and that they can't really get past that point. So exercises like heavy deadlifts, if you're able to do so with good form, exercises like farmer walks, just carrying those heavy dumbbells back and forth, or even like a dead hang, just holding onto a bar and holding on for as long as you can. Strengthening that grip is going to help you with almost all areas and aspects of fitness, and it truly is the sign of strength and vitality. The easiest way to tell if someone is really strong by looking at their forearms. If they have big, strong forearms, you can tell it is the sign of someone who is really strong. And not easy to build forearms. So ladies are worried about building muscle, this does not happen overnight. So don't shy away from those heavy grip training exercises because the forearms tend to be very underactive, neglected, and weakened to the point where a lot of your other exercises would be better if you were just to strengthen the forearms and your grip. And then number 1 is a muscle called the glute med, or the gluteus medius. Now you might be thinking I'm talking about the gluteus maximus, the glute max, that big butt cheek muscle that is responsible for the majority of your strength and power in your lower body. That's not what I'm talking about here. So that is a super important muscle to train, but I think right now the trend, no pun intended, but I think right now the trend is a lot of glute work. So the glute max tends to be not an issue because a lot of people are already aware of it, but the glute med is an issue. And it's a very small muscle attached the side part of your hip. So it is attached to the glute max, and this muscle is gonna help stability with your hip and your knee. And have you ever seen someone do a squat where their knees cave in? Usually their glute med is not active enough, and this can be a telltale sign that you're in for a really nasty knee injury. It's your risk of ACL tears, ligament tears in general, much higher if your knees are caving in and you don't have a strong glute med. So overall, I like to do a lot of single leg work, single leg deadlifts, Bulgarian split squats, lunges, all of that good stuff. And it's a good litmus test as well. If you find that your body is shaking all over the place, chances are that glute med is weaker, and it's gonna compensate one way or another. So before you get to lifting some of those really heavy weights, make sure you master the single leg work. One of the best ways to train your glute med is by doing single leg work with good form. If you're not there and your balance isn't there and your stability is not there, you're gonna have to do some isolation work. So grabbing one of those mini bands and really focusing on abduction, because the glute med is gonna help you out with that lateral movement side to side. It can also help with exercises like clamshells, fire hydrants, slow controlled movement, really focusing on abduction and lateral movement from the hip. So that's the glute med, and that is number 1 on my list. Because without it, or with poor stability, you are much more likely to get injured. You are much more likely to compensate with other muscles, the lower back, get knee pain, you get a bunch of different areas that can become problematic when it's not strengthened enough. So that is number 1 on the list. Once again, to recap the top 5 neglected muscles that you should not be ignoring. Number 5, the serratus anterior. Number 4, the hamstrings. Number 3, the rear delts. Number 2, the forearms. And number 1, the glute med. If you have any suggestions or thoughts on this video at all, put them in the comments below. Let me know if you have any suggestions for any future videos. As usual, please like the video if you found this valuable, and subscribe if you would like to see future videos. Thank you all, and see you next week.